Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
This is Cynthia Toolin-Wilson. I'm here with Father Allan Deck, and we're going to be talking about the book, Building Intercultural Competence for Ministers. So welcome, Father Deck.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, I'm very excited that you're here. I've read this book several years ago. We actually had done the modules here at Holy Apostles. So it was a very interesting book, very interesting course, so to speak. Would you like to start us with prayer before we get started?
Sure. Let us take a moment then to get in touch with our loving God, to thank Him for the time that we have to delve into these important issues, to grow in knowledge, but most especially to grow in love of God and love of our neighbor. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and enkindle in us the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. O God, you instructed the hearts of your faithful by the light of the Holy Spirit. Grant us in this same Spirit to be truly wise and ever to rejoice in his consolations through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Yes, so as I mentioned, several years ago we did the modules here at Holy Apostles, and I found them to be quite enlightening. My initial degree from 1985 was in sociology, and so I enjoyed seeing so much of the kind of work that I was interested in being brought into this issue of intercultural competencies. So I don't know if you would like to start by giving us an overview of the book.
Sure. I guess I could talk a little bit about kind of the origins of it too, huh?
Oh, that would be nice.
A booklet that was really asked of us by the Committee on Cultural Diversity of the Bishops' Conference, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. It was entrusted to the secretariat or the division that I was asked to begin in the year 2008. It was called the Secretariat of Cultural Diversity in the Church, and it continues to this very day. I was the first executive director, and Mark Munoz Visoso is now the current executive director of the Secretariat. This booklet was really the response to the challenge that the Church has been facing for a long time now as a result of the movement of people and the ongoing migrations that have occurred in the 20th century, particularly the second part of the 20th century, that really have been transforming the American Catholic Church. It's bringing new life, new people into the Church, and what we find happening is that many of our parishes that were made up of homogeneous cultural groups have been transformed by the coming of frequently more than one new culture or a different culture coming to be part of the community. And, this is not easy. There are adjustments that have to be made, and there are challenges that have to be faced as people from different cultures and races, languages, and so forth try to make a common home out of their parish. 100 years ago, the Catholic Church in the United States approached this matter in a different way. We created national parishes. Those of you who live in the Midwest or in the East especially know all about the national parishes. The church where the Germans went, or where the Italians went, or where the Poles went, or where the Irish went, that kind of thing. And that was the way we went about dealing with diversity 100 years ago or more. There are various reasons why we're not doing that or not able to do that today. And as a result of the coming together of people in the world that we live in, cultural competence, intercultural competence has become really a fundamental requirement. Especially, this booklet was for ministers, for anybody that is exercising service and leadership in a community or in a parish or in a Catholic school or a Catholic organization and so forth. So the bishops were very interested in providing orientation for parish leadership, and of course for our priests as well, in adapting to the new situation. So that's why we put this thing together. We counted on the services of quite a group. We convened a couple of gatherings actually before we even started composing this book. We convened a group of experts that had a track record both academically in the areas of intercultural studies, but also in theology, to talk about what was needed. And so we came up with a plan to have as simple and straightforward a workshop as we could develop. One that was, you might say, it's kind of like intercultural competence 101. In other words, we're not going to tell you everything you need to know about it because it's a vast field. But it's for those who are beginning to think in a more systematic way about what really is involved when in the life of the church we have people of so many different cultural groups coming together in order to form community. And so that's what we did. And now the thing that I was most excited about in putting this together with the help of many colleagues, and I say many experts, the thing that excited me the most is that it was an opportunity to also frame the discussion of intercultural competence, to frame it in a theological way. Because one of the things that I think we have not adequately done is help people understand that as Catholics and as Christians, the goal or the purpose of intercultural competence, of developing those competencies, is really linked to our very understanding of our identity as Christians and as Catholics. In other words, it's for us Christians, it's not just a matter of, in the context of so much diversity in the world that we live in and in our country today, we just need to get along. That's one thing. Or we need to be tolerant. That's good. But it really has to do with a requirement of the church's very mission, because the church's mission is precisely to communicate the values of Jesus Christ to cultures. In other words, when we say that we evangelize, what are we talking about? We're talking about how the gospel message of Jesus engages the world, the thinking, the feeling, the way of being of people. And what is thinking, the way of being, the way of feeling of a people? Another word for that is culture. So we're engaged in cultures. And so we really cannot accomplish what the church is about without having skills, abilities, competencies, knowledge about culture and how human beings deal with the reality of cultural differences and so forth, because that's a fundamental skill that an ability that is needed today. It always was needed, but now it's needed more and more.
And we're more aware of it.
We're more aware of it. I mean, you have to be more aware of it because in an age of globalization and in an age of migration, in an age of international economics, social media, travel. I mean, it goes on and on and on. What's happening is that humans are interacting, are engaging each other in more intensely than they ever have in the history of the human race. And some of the struggles and the difficulties that we're having in the world, wars and unhappiness and whatever, is the result of our failure to prepare ourselves adequately to respond to these new and changing realities that are happening in our world. Because people are migrating, whether, there's been a reaction to some of the challenges that come with the migration of people. I know that it's not a simple issue or one that you can explain easily, but I think that we know that there are all kinds of social, economic, and political reasons why people are on the move. Because one of the reasons they're on the move is for safety and also for economic survival. And so Catholic teaching is very clear about the fact that nations have a right to establish borders and to maintain order and who comes in, who goes out of these different countries. But people also have a equal right to flee their country if they have to, or to seek for a better life if they have to. And so that's what we're dealing with now in this whole conversation about immigration. But for the Catholic Church, this is nothing new. The Church is what it is precisely because it has adapted itself in history and in time to virtually all the cultures in the world.
Yes.
So that's a skill that should come as part of our Catholic heritage, really. But, we need to get into it and study it and so forth. So anyway, I was happy to be involved, particularly in writing a very brief first workshop, which kind of looks at how, from the point of view of Catholic faith, we are thinking about this question of intercultural encounters, because I felt what's been going on in our country and in many other countries is that the leadership in explaining and talking about intercultural affairs has been pretty much devoted to or taken up by people in the world of business, because this is an issue that's important to business, actually. You want to sell your goods to people, you need to know how to relate to them, okay? So business is a lot about interculturality and education, but particularly public education, because the public schools in the United States, have a duty to educate everybody. And so in the world of education, there's been quite a conversation and a commitment to the importance that diversity makes in the quality of a school, because a school that doesn't offer diverse kinds of experiences and encounters is not going to have the same academic quality that is from a school that is open to diversity. It's a matter for education. It's a matter of of quality of what they're doing, and there are other values too, but that's one of the big ones. So anyway, it's good to see the Church take a position in this area because it has much to offer because of its national character. The Catholic Church is truly an international group. People have said that the whole world fits into the Catholic Church because it's Catholic.
Yes, universal.
Yeah, universal, right. So, you want to talk about the other modules? I could explain. Altogether there are 5.
Yes.
The first one is focused in on theology. The second one, kind of laying the foundation for how we're talking about things, and it's called Seek an Understanding of Culture and How It Works. So the approach to the subject of intercultural encounter and relations frequently, and in the case of these modules as well, it is framed from the point of view of the science, the social science of anthropology. You said you sociology, so you know something about this.
Sociology, yeah.
Yeah. So there's certainly sociological elements, but it's really more anthropology, particularly cultural anthropology, which is the study of the customs, the way of being, the way of thinking, and so forth of people, of different peoples, based upon a number of different experiences and elements that make up, a culture. From our Catholic point of view, this is very important because one of the most influential sources for the thinking of the Second Vatican Council, which has been so important for us in our lifetime for the religious church. A lot of the thinking of the Second Vatican Council is based upon appreciation of culture, and therefore it shows that insights that come from the field of cultural studies or anthropology have been very, very important. You see this particularly in the document Gaudium et Spes, the document on the Church in the Modern World, as it's called in English, Gaudium et Spes. And you see it also in Lumen Gentium, the Constitution on the Church of the Second Vatican Council, and in other documents as well. But in those two in particular, the Church in the Second Vatican Council made it very clear that it understands its very identity, its very purpose for being. It understands it precisely in terms of communicating the gospel and the message of Jesus to people, and to bring about transformation in individuals and in cultures. In a certain sense, the Church made it very clear in Gaudium et Spes that evangelization is always focused and ultimately focused on the conversion of cultures, not just the conversion of individuals. Frequently we think of, to be converted to the Church is just a personal, individual kind of experience. But the Church's way of thinking is that evangelization really doesn't happen until more than just the individual, because every individual lives in a context. Every individual has a group of people, a family. Every individual lives in a culture, which means that they have certain symbols and certain myths in the anthropological sense. I mean, by myth, I mean important stories that explain to them, what life is about and where they're going, what's happening in our world. Everybody has significant stories and symbols that are expressive of the meaning that people are pursuing, or how they understand themselves and their life and their relationship with God and with others and so forth. This is all culture, so that it's not just about converting individuals. It must be about converting culture or cultures. It means instilling in attitudes and practices that whole communities are involved in, instilling in those practices and attitudes the values of Jesus, which would be love, justice, mercy, compassion, care, all those qualities that we identify with the teachings of Christ. And so the evangelization of cultures then is what evangelization is all about. So if we're really going to do it, though, we have to understand what we're facing, what all is involved in that. So anyway, in this second module, what we do is we talk about, how culture is understood, the distinctions that can be made about it, how it's understood, and it's very simple but kind of straightforward. And what's going on when cultures begin to interact with each other.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then the third module goes into particular communication skills that are helpful in a pastoral setting. And of course, we're thinking, probably mainly of parishes, because that's where you might say a basic, the most fundamental unit beyond the family, of course, of the church would be the parish, especially in the United States, where our parish system is very, very strong and well developed. But it goes into, what's going on in that context. And for instance, it helps us understand how different cultures relate to meetings, having meetings, how people have different attitudes about why they go to meetings, or different attitudes toward time. Not every culture gives as much importance as ours does, for instance, to punctuality. It might drive people crazy, but there are some cultures where, it really is expected or ordinary for people to be late. It's okay. Whereas in our culture, it is not okay. I think maybe in German culture, it's even less okay. Different cultures have different attitudes towards something like punctuality or decision-making, different attitudes toward how decisions in group environments are made. An example I would give you would be in our American cultural context, it's okay when a group is discussing something and wants to make a decision that we take a vote. There may be different opinions about how to do something, and so you reach a point and say, okay, well, here are the arguments. This is what we're thinking. This is the pros. These are the cons, and these are the possibilities. So let's decide, and we'll vote, and we do it by, and we'll respect the majority. The majority was what they want to do is what we'll do. That's fine. Kind of a democratic proceed. Well, there are some cultures where really that just is not acceptable. It's not acceptable because the culture gives more importance to consensus. In other words, the community isn't going to be happy until almost everybody, or especially if everybody, is in agreement. Now, you might say, my God, does that make decision-making a little bit more difficult? Well, I guess it does. It does. But on the other hand, once you've made it, people are kind of invested in because this is what the whole group wants to do. Whereas in a democracy, the opposition, will tell the opposition, oh, well, you don't like what we're doing? Well, wait for the next time we discuss this and take a vote. Maybe you'll win in that argument. You know what I mean? But in other words, you have to be able to live with a certain amount of disagreement. But there's some cultures that don't like to live with disagreement among people. They want to have more consensus, and so I would say that's been my experience in my Latin American cultures, and in other cultures that don't have the same, maybe as much of a particularly democratic kind of experience as we have had in the United States. So, but anyway, I could give many more examples of very different attitudes towards many very simple and fundamental aspects of life. And the more you get to know cultures, the more you see that there are a lot of ways to skin a cat. And this program helps us understand how different cultures deal with different things. I might add, a third area that is obviously, important would be dealing with conflicts. How you deal with some cultures are much more direct in dealing with conflicts. Get it off your chest. Tell me what you're thinking. Don't beat around the bush. That's considered a virtue. That's a good thing to do.
Right.
There's some cultures where it just won't work. It just won't work because they have, for instance, much more of a regard, for instance, for the status and the wisdom of the seniors, so that the elders have to be respected. You don't contradict an elder, even if they're wrong. You don't contradict them because that goes against the social fabric of the family and the society. Deal with conflict in parishes where there are 2, 3, 4 different cultural groups that are going to approach all of these things differently. So one of the things that we're doing with this Building Intercultural Competence program is educating people to the variety of ways that different cultures do things, and we're naming the particular skills that will help them learn, what's going on, and of course the idea that people will become. They may not approve of how other people want to do things or how they do things, but at least they know why. They know, what they're going to do and why they're doing it that way. And that's the beginning of knowledge, a knowledge that can be used to build bridges, among these peoples. So that's kind of interesting. Then you have Module 4. There are some particular roadblocks or obstacles that impede effective intercultural relations. And so we wanted to be upfront about the reality. And this is the reality of prejudice, the reality of stereotypes, the reality of racism. So our bishops have been quite clear about the fact that prejudices and stereotypes and racism, obviously, because we're human, exists in the church as well as in society. And we need to understand how those things work, because undoubtedly that's one of the sources of the conflict and the rejection, sometimes the exclusion of certain people from certain situations. And racism in particular is a sin. It's a sin. It is an intrinsic evil, as they say. And so we need to name it, and we need to be aware how it works. And when it shows its ugly face, we need to be able to call people, on that, to call ourselves on it. So how does that work? So it can be a little delicate, but the bishops didn't have any difficulty when we sent in our text here for, revision and for their consideration that they wanted this included, and so I think it tries to deal with it in a reasonable and balanced way, these types of things that are a little bit hard to talk about sometimes, prejudice, stereotypes. That's in Module 4. And then Module 5 kind of puts out there the overall goal of this kind of intercultural competence. It's not just to get along. It's really to bring about what the word that we use is integration. That is, the diversity of the different cultures in the life of a parish or an organization or the whole church, where the diversity is integrated, where somehow unity is brought about, but not a unity that is based upon uniformity. That is, in order to have union or communion, everybody has to think the same and say the same and act the same and be in conformity about everything. Well, that is a hopeless proposition. You're never going to get real kind of unity that way. And certainly the church doesn't want to have unity in that way. The church wants to have, unity that's based upon the ability to reach out in love, not only to people that are like us, not only people of our culture, not only people who think the way we do, but to other people who have other cultures and other experiences and other backgrounds, in order to create a communion of with differences, where there are differences. Okay, and that's something that the very word Catholic proposes to us, because the universal character of the Church has to do with its ability to truly engage the distinctive and the particular nature of all these different cultures, inviting them all to conversion, yes, because the values of the gospel are not the values of any particular culture, but they're the values. They're the values of God that have been revealed by Jesus, and so we have to be faithful to that, which means that the Church is permanently a critique of all cultures, so that there's for the Church, no one culture is the paragon of the Christian way, but rather the gospel that the Church preaches stands as a challenge to all the cultures, because none of them are perfect.
True.
And, that's kind of how we look at this. And we talk about how to foster integration in the area of a spirituality of hospitality by promoting reconciliation, which was the way St. Paul understood the very mission of Jesus, to reconcile all things to himself, and also in terms of something that the Vatican Council, and especially Pope Francis, has been pushing, the missionary character of the Church. And what are we talking about when we say the Church is missionary? We're going around trying to convince people that, we're right about everything, or that we have all the truth, something like that. No, that's not what we mean by mission. What we mean by mission is inviting, not imposing, but inviting people to encounter the loving God that we've come to know in Jesus. So how do you Pope Francis likes to talk about a church always going out. How do you become a church that's going out rather than turning inward? Because one of the values that intercultural competence proposes to us and tries to develop in us is precisely the value of being able to go out and engage rather than turn inward and move from others, just because they're different. And so a church that is truly missionary needs to be competent in terms of these values of intercultural affairs. So anyway, it goes into some suggestions, principles on how you can pursue that kind of integration in a parish, and it gives examples of parish life. And by the way, another booklet that came out after this one, the one titled Building Intercultural Competence for Ministers that we're discussing here, is another one that goes into what we've learned from pastors and from people in leadership in parishes who have tried to develop the intercultural context or the multicultural context of their communities. And there are a lot of very good and talented pastors out there, and people leaders in our parishes, deacons and catechists and other ministers who have done very well in creating what we call the shared parish or the multicultural parish, where these different are able to work together and get to know each other and create real communion in diversity. And so there's a book that gives all kinds of best practices in doing that. So anyway, that's kind of in a nutshell what this little booklet is trying to do and why it's so important to the life of the Church.
Yeah, I was very impressed with this Module 5 because I was a convert, but I am very familiar with the assimilation model, where you bring people in, and so this is very different. And I think that's it's a move in the right direction. I think we are more welcoming when we're not trying to change everyone into the same.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people have a kind of commonsensical and idea, and it's very understandable. People will say, well, shouldn't we Americanize the immigrants? Shouldn't we Americanize the people of other cultures?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that is it's not the function of the church to Americanize. It's the function of the church to evangelize. Right. Okay,
yes.
Let's understand. It's not that it's bad to Americanize. It's just that our task is more radical than that. It's more fundamental than that. It's about communicating the gospel, not just, the values and the way of being of the people of the United States, no matter how good or it might be, but rather we're about the work of the gospel. We're about the work of Jesus Christ. And in order to do that properly, we have to create an atmosphere of mutual regard and mutual respect, an attitude. Pope Benedict liked to put it in these terms. We have to think of the church as always, and ourselves as always giving, so we give from what we have, but also receiving. In other words, evangelization is a two-way street. It's not just that we've got everything, all our ducks lined up and everything correct and everything right. That's not effective or respectful, because the Holy Spirit is present in the cultures and in the thoughts and in the values of other people too. And we're capable of learning from others, and they're capable of bringing some of their values to us, and indeed, they can improve our relationship. They can improve how our lives. I'll give you an example. Today, as we're speaking, it's the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the 12th of December. And one of the curious and interesting things is that the most celebrated feast of Our Lady, of Mary, the Mother of Jesus, in the Church in the United States today is the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, even though, you might recall, the Immaculate Conception, Our Lady understood as the Immaculate Conception, is the patroness. That's why we have that beautiful basilica in Washington, the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception. Now, why is that? Well, why is it that Our Lady, under the title of Guadalupe, really has captured the fancy or the imagination of people in a way that the Immaculate Conception has not? Well, it has everything to do with the vitality and the life and the beauty of the way the people from Mexico celebrate it. How they come, and they bring their music, and they bring their processions, and they bring their art, and they bring their food, and they provide a kind of a real sense of the celebration of the life of the church must be a real celebration. I mean, they really do it. They really do it, and they. So, what is one of the contributions that an immigrant group can make? Well, they can bring a certain vitality. They can bring a certain joy. They can bring their own dispositions and ways of doing things. They can bring their music. I know here in Southern California, when we want to have a party and we want to entertain people that aren't Latino at all or Hispanic, they will actually invite mariachis. You may have heard of mariachis. These are musicians that sing, and they're very, and they use the trumpet and the guitar and the violin, and they're very joyful, and they're great to really. You want to create a party spirit? That's one way to do it. So you'd say, is that significant? I think it's very significant, because it draws people into a life of prayer and worship, but also does so in a way that's enjoyable, that's fun. So we should do that. And the church is enriched by different cultures that bring those kinds of,
Yes. I was in San Antonio, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, on Good Friday. and I was there for the procession and the enactment of the crucifixion. And then later on in the day when they took these men that I believe they had tied them to the crosses, they took them down, and we went into the big church there. I believe it was a cathedral. And, the statue of Christ was there covered with flowers. And that made the whole Good Friday experience for me so different than it had been.
Yeah.
I was just it really did enrich me. And I was so very impressed by it, something that I never would have had the opportunity to see if I didn't just happen to be in San Antonio on that date.
That's right.
So I absolutely agree with you. It does enrich.
Yeah. And
very
so,
deep spirituality.
It does. And we could talk about other qualities that various groups bring to the church, so that we need to be, as Pope Francis has said repeatedly, we need to keep building the competency, but another way to put it that's more graphic, we need to keep building bridges.
Yeah.
Bridges, two ways, going back and forth.
Yes.
And that if we don't do that in the church, but certainly even in our world, the consequences are very, very dire for the human race, because there's going to be nationalisms and divisions and wars and all these things, so that we have quite a stake in developing this kind of awareness, I would say.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I noticed also in this module 5, we have something called the methodology of the Church in America. And I thought that the three, the Catholic identity, the communion, the solidarity, that is something that could be brought to the individual parishes and concentrated upon, especially when you're in areas that are more diverse.
Yes.
So it's very interesting to see this, because everybody, the second one, communion, everybody offers all the people the sense of identity, purpose, and community they seek. The communion of the church, rooted in God's love, regardless of exactly how their liturgies are performed. It's very interesting to see this kind of awareness about this methodology of the church.
Yes.
That we all have this identity, that we all, we all have this communion, and we really have a solidarity. But we need to recognize that in the diversity rather than just what I would call like vanilla flavor.
Yeah, exactly. Because, we have to respect the particular, not just the universal. So we have to show a regard for the particular as well as the universal, not just go to the universal, And the other thing is, there's what we call in philosophy, I guess, a philosophical term, univocal thinking. Univocal thinking. There's only one way to do something, and that's the right way, and you exclude all the other possibilities. Well, this is a formula for disaster, because we really need to have the ability to differentiate what is going to be effective. You can't be pastoral if you just have one way of thinking about everything. You have to adapt to people, to situations, to circumstances, and that's what this kind of intercultural experience kind of helps us do. And then the other thing, there in that same module that you were talking about, there are these principles for ecclesial integration and inclusion. One of them, I think, pretty obvious, but worth thinking about. Plan with the people and not just for the people.
Yeah,
different. And that's something that in a church like ours, which tends to be structured hierarchically, there's a kind of you expect some authority above is going to tell you what to do, and you don't necessarily invite people to participate or to reach horizontally,
Right.
to each. And this is a formula for ineffectiveness, because you're not going to get real investment of people in the life of the community if it's just kind of a top-down business. It has to be from the bottom up as well. That's a principle that already in Lumen Gentium and in Gaudium et Spes, the Church has been proposing to us the need to open up the Church so that it's a real place of communion, not just before the Vatican Council, they would define the Church as a perfect society. It was kind of an institution or an organization, that kind of thing.
Right.
And after the Vatican Council, we defined it as communion, and we defined it as the people of God, the people of God. So it's very important that we see that this intercultural skills are very conducive building the kind of church that we want today. So,
yeah, and certainly right in line with Vatican II.
Absolutely, that was Vatican II was all about that.
Yeah. Another one of these principles that I thought, empowering people from different cultures and ethnicities into leadership positions. So often, that isn't what happens. Even if they are welcomed in, they're expected not to be in the leadership.
There you go. And of course, and then people complain that, nobody's doing anything around here in this parish, that we don't, it's always the same usual suspects, the same people that are doing all the work in the parish. Maybe because they're not letting or letting others do the work, or having the foresight to prepare people who, need leaders, ministers in the church certainly need to be formed. So how do you identify and how do you form, how do you work with the talent that we have in our parishes, the goodwill of people who do want to help but may not have all the skills yet. They think, they have time and attention paid to developing those kinds of things. So, in other words, there are a lot of principles in this booklet, Building Intercultural Competence for Ministers, in this program. There are a lot of principles that really enhance everything that we're trying to do in parish, really.
Certainly when you mention that the leadership also needs to be aware of this and needs to be willing to work with people and bring them in and help to train them. We're just starting a parish administration course here, for our seminarians. And I thought this, something like this is perfect, to have something like that brought into how do you find your leaders in your church? How do you encourage that in your parish? Regardless of ethnicity, race, where they're from, whatever. So, it's a golden opportunity at this time.
Yes. These are challenging times. There's no doubt about it that a lot of things are changing. A lot of things are developing. Unfortunately, there's a climate kind of a polarization and fear.
Yes.
But that's at one level. But what I find most interesting is that at another level, it seems to me that there's a growing awareness that, yes, we have all these challenges and there's a climate of fear that is very destructive. But we are actually learning how to work with each other, and we're beginning to see all the good things that come about from the engagement among peoples, and how there can be real unity in diversity, but we just have to, know what that's about and have the generosity to work with it and learn that we're all becoming better as a result of that,
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but you have to be open to it. Some parts of the country are more limited in their experience of this, or they've begun to have this experience more recently than not. So they just don't know what to do. I remember years ago, here in California, we've been used to, the presence of the Spanish-speaking people from Latin America. From, the decades of the 20th century, we had a migration from Mexico here into California. So much so that the biggest single group in the state of California are the people of Hispanic origin. It's bigger now, the people of European American origin. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? But we don't have any majority in California. In other words, the people of European background are not the majority anymore. They're less than 50%. And the people of Hispanic origin are not the majority, but they're still a few more than the European descent people. And then you've got the Asian groups and people from African Americans, but also people from Africa and the Middle East, and it goes on and on and on. So interesting from that point of view.
It is, yeah.
But, yeah. And so we're seeing that we can begin to create a church that's much more inclusive, because that's one of the underlying issues is the all-embracing love of God. In the Bible, it's one of the great central themes of the Scriptures, both the Old Testament and the New Testament. God's universal love. God loves all people. And whenever I say that, I say, is there anything you don't understand about the word all? God. I mean, it's fine to say that's a nice idea that God loves all people, but is that really true? Well, if it's really true, what does it mean to me? What does it mean? Because there's some people that we really think we shouldn't love for X, Y, or reasons. But fine, okay. But God loves everyone. Loves everyone, and so that is one of the truths about the God that we've come to know in the Scriptures.
Absolutely. I was teaching. I was teaching an ecclesiology class. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago here at Holy Apostles, and we had. I think I had 18 people sitting around the table, and I looked up and I realized. I don't know why I didn't realize it before, but I didn't. And I realized how many people were from different countries. So I went around the room and I said, "Where are you from?" And so we had someone from Venezuela, from India, 2 people from Vietnam. All told, out of 18 people, we had 13 people from different countries. And I just sat there and I was so happy. And I said to the seminarians, just think of how lucky we are here, that in all of us, really, we see the universal church, and we're all coming from all these different countries. It was fascinating to me. It's so enriching.
Absolutely.
It was really beautiful.
I just finished this semester. I had a course on Foundations of Pastoral Theology, and I had 15. This was a graduate course for a master's degree, where I teach at Loyola Marymount University. And of the 15, 7 were international. I had 4 priests, 2 from Africa, 1 from India, 1 from Korea, and 1 from Korea. And then I had
amazing.
2 sisters, both from Vietnam. And it just and in studying pastoral and practical theology, we were able to really find out about the very different situations in which the church has to function in different parts of the world, the different conditions. We found out that the great burning issues that we have as a church, or even the controversial issues that sometimes we have in the United States, are not necessarily burning or controversial in some other parts of the world. They've got other issues that they're dealing with. So it helps understand, why, for instance, the work of, for instance, of the Holy Father is so difficult, because he has to be the shepherd of all of these different people.
Yes.
And different cultures, and therefore are going to look at different aspects of the experience and understand things so differently. So
I think
it's exciting.
Yeah, the first time I really became aware of that in our online program, we have an initiative with the Eritrean Church. We've been working with them, I think, for 4 or 5 years now, helping to train the sisters and the priests, so that they could open a seminary. They couldn't come out of the country for training, but they could have online learning. And it was amazing to me when I heard the differences in their experiences and ours. It was very enlightening.
Yeah.
And I thought, I think we've graduated now 40 of them, and really, just as Catholic as we are, they're interested in Vatican II. They take Christology and Trinity, and they love the information. It's just such an experience to be able to teach people from a country where the circumstances are so different.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And that's going on, I think, all over our country. We have, a very, very significant number of international priests and international sisters, by the way, the women religious that come from the other
people here too. From Vietnam, mostly.
Yeah. And so it reflects the reality of the universal church that we're in, which is really one of the beauties of it.
But I like what you said. I mean, if there's anything that I think people should take away from this, not only the intercultural skills and what that can lead to, but the fact that the church is universal, but it is also very particular.
Yep.
So we have to be aware of each individual church, each individual Catholic church. It really gives us a better sense of the diversity that's out there.
Right. It's a little bit like one of the realizations that people have is a lot of Catholics in the United States, are not aware of the other forms of diversity in the universal Catholic Church. I mean, for instance, referring to the fact that there are a number of Eastern Catholic churches that are part of the Catholic Church, but they're not the Roman Catholic Church.
Yes.
They are the Catholic Church, the ancient churches of the Middle East, for instance, the Maronite churches and we often call them other rites, but they're not just rites. They're proper churches in their own, because some of them are more ancient than the Roman Church, Because before Saint Peter got to Rome, he was in Antioch, and the church in Antioch before it was ever functioning in Rome, and so it's more ancient than the Roman Church. And so we must respect that because it's apostolic also. In other words, it's connected to the apostles as the Roman Church is. So these are little subtleties that, or the whole question of are we going to have a celibate priesthood or not? Well, the fact of the matter is we've always had married priests. From the beginning, we had married priests. But we just didn't have them after the year 1000 in the Western Church, but we've always had them in the Eastern churches, although celibacy has always been highly regarded in the church as a gift, but not necessarily connected to priesthood. That's all.
Right.
And so to get these things, straightened out. But my point is diversity. There's a kind of diversity of sorts in the very church itself. The Eastern churches have canon law. They have their own canon law.
Right.
And the Roman Church respects the canon law of the Eastern churches because they're apostolic and they have roots that are as old or older than ours. So we,
yes,
that's part of the whole reality, which will allow, I think, the church to find ways to be together, to seek for unity that isn't based, as I said before, based upon conformity.
Right.
We can deal with differences. We can work with it because God is the author of variety.
Yes.
God is
the
author
he
of,
certainly is.
So we can deal with it too.
I agree. Well, I want to thank you very much for granting me this interview. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed being involved with this workbook over 5 years ago, or maybe over 4 years ago. So I really want to thank you for granting me this interview.
Sure. Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad that you've picked up the resource, and if I can do anything to help you, get the word out there, I'd be happy to do.
Okay.
So
thank you very much.
Okay.
God
Take care, Cynthia. You too. Bye-bye.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.